If someone had told me that yarn, simple yarn, would rebuild my life, I would have smiled politely and changed the subject. But there I was, standing under the lights, on a stage I never imagined, surrounded by women who had stitched their dignity back together with their own hands. And all I could think was, it all began with a sweater. A sweater they mocked. A sweater that went viral. And a woman who finally said, enough. If you've ever been dismissed for being too old, if your dreams were ever shoved into a box labeled silly or unrealistic, then this story was made for you. Stay with me until the end, because the thread they tried to cut is the one that wove my freedom. It was a cold January morning when Ruth cast off the final stitch of a navy blue sweater with delicate white details. Her hands trembled with age, but still moved with the precision of decades. She turned the sweater gently, folding it as carefully as she used to wrap her children's Christmas gifts years ago. For her, every sweater was more than just clothing, it was a hug meant to last for years. Knitting had always been her way of breathing. Since high school, when she would hide balls of yarn in her notebooks and secretly knit during boring classes. While her classmates scribbled equations, Ruth was decoding patterns, as if mapping her own destiny in silence. On the kitchen table, remnants of a solitary breakfast. A lipstick-stained mug, a few breadcrumbs, and a kettle still steaming. The radio played a soft tune from the 70s, she hummed it by habit more than joy. The landline phone, beside the fridge, hadn't rung in days. Her cell phone only showed ads and appointment reminders. No, hey mom, or, grandma, how's the cold? The silence had become familiar, but still stung. At 64, divorced, Ruth lived alone in a modest house in rural Pennsylvania. The walls had heard more silence than laughter. Her son Daniel, married to a woman who thought crochet was just something bored old ladies do, rarely visited. When he did, it felt like a chore. He'd bring the grandkids, but they barely looked up from their phones, locked into a world Ruth could never access. So, she'd watch them from the corner, knitting. As if stitching invisible bridges across generations. But that morning, something unusual happened. Josh, her oldest grandson, showed up unannounced. He rushed in, barely slowing down, and spotted the folded sweater on the armchair. Whoa, Grandma, that's ugly. But kind of vintage, right? I'm posting this on TikTok as a joke, might go viral, he laughed, not even asking permission. Ruth just smiled. A quiet, resigned smile. The kind you learn after decades of hearing that what you love has no value. She didn't know it yet, but that video, posted as a joke, was about to unravel the entire story of her life. One stitch at a time. Ruth had spent all her youth and half her adult life devoted to family. She married young, to Leonard, a sharp-tongued man whose eyes were always fixed on himself. He never hit her, but not all wounds leave marks. His weapon was indifference, calculated dismissal. To Leonard, crochet was pointless. When he found her knitting after long days of childcare and housework, he'd say, "Why are you playing grandma already? Go wash those dishes piling up." Ruth, exhausted, swallowed her words. If she talked back, he'd punish her with silence, the cruelest response when all she wanted was to be seen. Eventually, she began doing small repairs for neighbors, hemming pants, replacing buttons, fixing Sunday dresses. It helped pay the bills, and secretly kept her knitting. Every stitch was a release. Every thread, a voice she couldn't speak aloud. After the divorce, there was relief, and emptiness. She finally had peace, but almost no one to share it with. She tried to start again with what she loved, scattering yarn across the living room and diving into textures, combinations, and patterns only she knew. It was the one thing she still did with pride. But the comments never stopped, they just changed voices. "Who are you making rugs for, Mom? Nobody uses that stuff anymore," Daniel would say, eyes glued to his phone. "Grandma, you should sell this at a thrift store. Someone might buy it out of pity," Amanda, her daughter-in-law, mocked between selfies. Still, Ruth carried on. Her time-worn hands danced with the needles on the loneliest nights. While the world slept, she created sweaters, scarves, shawls, socks. Pieces no one asked for, but full of meaning. She didn't crave fame, likes, or applause, just a space to exist without being laughed at. Then came the video. Posted as a joke. Josh, her eldest grandson, filmed the navy sweater and snorted. "Look what my grandma made, straight out of a museum, right? So vintage." Ruth expected nothing. But that night, the universe seemed to whisper back. Over 200,000 likes. Thousands of comments. "This is pure art. Where can I buy this amazing sweater? Reminds me of something my grandma made. I'd pay big." Ruth's phone lit up non-stop. For the first time in forever, not with scams or chain messages, but admiration. The next day, Daniel called. His voice, usually dull, now excited. "Mom. Your sweater went viral. We have to ride this wave. I'll handle the business side. Amanda's good with photos, she can run the Insta. It'll be fun, you'll see." Ruth listened in silence. Every word echoed years of veiled criticism. Now they saw value, not in her, but in what she could bring. And this was only the beginning. The morning after the video went viral, Ruth woke up like any other day, with the scent of chamomile tea in the air and birds chirping outside her window. But something felt off. Her phone, usually still, buzzed non-stop. Notifications exploded across the screen like fireworks, emails, Facebook alerts, new Instagram followers, which she barely knew how to check. Confused, Ruth tapped the first link, sent by her youngest granddaughter, Lily. The video loaded. It was Josh, her oldest grandson, dancing in front of a mirror wearing the navy sweater with white stripes she had made with such care. The caption read, "My grandma made this. Ugly? Maybe. But it's super vintage." The video had over 1.2 million views. And in the comments, something unexpected. "This is pure art. Where can I buy it? This grandma is a national treasure. Please someone open a store for her." Ruth cupped her mouth. A warmth surged through her chest. It was emotion, but a confusing one. A quiet pride, tinged with something darker. The messages started coming. Her oldest daughter, the one who always grumbled, "This house looks like a tangled yarn nest," called and said, "Mom, we need to talk ASAP about the brand potential. Can we have a family meeting tonight?" Her ex-husband Leonard, the same man who mocked her yarn for years, sent a voice message in his usual patronizing tone. "Ruth. I always knew you had talent. Really. Maybe we could partner up, bring this to the local market. You don't have to do everything on your own, right?" Even her sister, whom she hadn't spoken to since the fight over their mother's house, reappeared. "Ruth, darling, thinking about you today. If you need a social media manager, I'm here. You know I always believed in you." That night, Ruth didn't eat. She closed her bedroom door, lit her bedside lamp, and sat on the edge of the bed. Around her were her loyal companions, knitting needles of all sizes, vibrant yarns, hand-drawn patterns in stained old notebooks. What had once been mocked was now seen as gold. But it wasn't the value they were after, it was control. She was no longer the eccentric old lady with yarn everywhere. Now, she was a business opportunity. The tear that rolled down her cheek wasn't sadness. It was clarity. And fury. They never mocked the yarn. They mocked her. They never saw what she created, only the space it took up. And now that the world saw her, they came running, like vultures circling a freshly served feast. Ruth took a deep breath. She grabbed her oldest notebook, the one stained with coffee and filled with notes from when she still believed love was enough. And in bold letters, she wrote, "Threaded legacy, my story, in every stitch." Then, standing before the mirror, she really looked at herself. Loose white hair, eyes steady, wrinkles not of age, but of resilience. And in a quiet, unbreakable voice, she whispered, "Enough. From now on, no one touches my thread. This story, I stitch it myself." The next morning, Ruth brewed her usual chamomile and cinnamon tea. But instead of sitting in her armchair to knit, she sat in front of her computer, shoulders back, a new spark in her eyes. She typed, with trembling fingers, how to open an online knitting store. Within minutes, she was diving into tutorials, videos, forums. For the first time, she wasn't just crafting for fun, she was building something of her own. Something that belonged entirely to her. She pulled out a brand new notebook and wrote at the top of the page, "Threaded legacy." The name had come to her like a whisper in the night, a legacy stitched by hand, thread by thread, memory by memory. But excitement quickly collided with reality. She knew nothing about business. She'd never built a website, didn't understand sales, and the last time she used social media was to like an old photo of her grandson. Still, Ruth persisted. She began photographing her pieces with her phone. She used the backyard as her studio, hanging sweaters on wooden hangers and letting the afternoon light soften each stitch. She created an Instagram account with her brand's name. She posted her first photo with a simple caption, "Made with soul." The first days were discouraging. A few likes. No orders. Random messages asking about prices, and then disappearing. With each failed attempt, the doubt crept in like a weed. Who would buy from a 64-year-old woman, she whispered, staring at her fingers worn from decades of knitting. But then, fortune whispered from an unexpected corner. While signing up for a free senior entrepreneurship course, Ruth joined an online discussion group and met Helena, a 70-year-old retired woman who sold handmade cookies and embraced Ruth like a soul sister. "Don't give up, Ruth," Helena said through a webcam smile. "You've got gold in your hands. You just need to learn how to wrap it." With her new friend's help, Ruth learned the basics of marketing, customer service, and how to set up a simple online store. It wasn't easy. The fear of the unknown made her hesitate at every step. Sometimes, even the website page seemed to mock her, like her children once had. "What if it fails?" she whispered one night, staring at the blank store homepage. But then, with a newfound strength in her voice, she answered herself. "What if this is the first thing that finally works, truly?" And with her heart pounding, she clicked publish. With the online store now live, Ruth dove into a world she never imagined herself in. Every day was a new challenge, learning how to package orders, how to reply to customers, how to put a price on something made with heart. It was exhausting, but strangely thrilling. The first orders came slowly, like raindrops before a storm. A young woman from Portland ordered a scarf for her grandmother. A man from Texas requested 2 matching beanies, one for himself, one for his boyfriend. Ruth cried as she packed the items, wrapping each in craft paper, tying them with red ribbon, and adding a handwritten note. "Made with love and story." Messages soon warmed her inbox. "Feels like a hug from my grandma. My daughter won't take the sweater off, not even to sleep. You can feel the care in every stitch." Each word was a balm. And fuel. Ruth started sharing her routine on Instagram, short videos of her weathered hands knitting to Ella Fitzgerald, behind-the-scenes shots of orders, even silly mistakes she once would have hidden. To her surprise, followers began to grow. One day, a well-known influencer reposted one of her videos with the caption, "Pure art, crafted by hands that have lived. The shop exploded. Orders poured in. But with success came fatigue. Ruth could barely keep up. She slept little, her fingers throbbed, and she felt trapped again, this time by the very thing she loved most. One Saturday, while walking through her neighborhood, she stopped outside the old community center. The paint peeled, the garden overgrown. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. "I want to teach other women to do what I do. And I want to hire them," she told the coordinator firmly. The following week, 5 women sat in a circle in the center's back room. Retired. Overlooked. Full of stories no one listened to anymore, but hands still alive with talent. There, the real heart of Threaded Legacy was born. Afternoons of knitting became healing sessions. Laughter. Memories. Old songs playing from a dusty radio. Each item now made by different hands, every stitch a scar turned into beauty. Ruth created special labels to honor the artisans, made by Estella, 71, retired literature teacher. Made by Marlene, 68, widow and dreamer. Made by Dolores, 74, retired seamstress. Customers adored it. Sales soared. In time, Ruth hired a young woman to manage social media. She rented a small space to serve as storage. She was invited to craft fairs, interviewed by blogs, and one day, an email popped up. Special feature invitation, senior women entrepreneurs. Ruth, who once felt invisible among balls of yarn, was now called a creative influencer. But deep down, she knew, true success wasn't in revenue. It lived in the glowing eyes of each woman rediscovering strength through yarn. It lived in silences healed by conversation, in stitches binding lives together, in laughter filling the afternoon air. And even with all the recognition, Ruth remained faithful to what started it all, crafting with her hands what her heart couldn't yet say. With Threaded Legacy thriving, Ruth was now being featured in articles about women entrepreneurs over 60. A Huffington Post journalist called her a symbol of late-life reinvention. She never sought the spotlight, but the recognition felt bittersweet. Like strong tea that jolts the spirit. Then the messages started rolling in, not from customers, but from her past. Daniel, her absentee son, texted her with the same tone he used as a kid asking for movie money. "Mom, I saw you're blowing up. Amanda's studying marketing now. She could help scale this, make it a real family thing. Wouldn't that be cool?" That word, family, hit hard. He'd never once called her crochet a business. Now he wanted to make it a brand with their last name on it. A few days later, her eldest daughter appeared at her door with a store-bought cake and a tight smile. "Hi, Mom. I came to talk. I think we could open a physical store." Picture it, Threaded Legacy, powered by family tradition. "I could run the register. You just keep doing what you love." Ruth looked at her quietly. She remembered the afternoons spent hearing that knitting is what people do when they've run out of purpose. The times her pieces were hidden before guests arrived. The silent mockery. And the video. The one that turned her pain into a path. "I appreciate it, dear," she said sweetly. "But these days, my family is the women who build this with me. Women who, like me, were underestimated for years. And who now stitch their own stories." Her daughter lowered her eyes. No yelling. No argument. Just the quiet power of someone who finally knew their worth. Days later, Leonard, yes, him, showed up. Wrinkled suit, anxious gaze. "Ruth. I heard you're doing really well. I thought maybe we could invest together. Start over." She chuckled kindly and pointed to the wall where her shop sign hung. "Threaded Legacy, where every stitch tells a story. You always said I lacked ambition. And now that I have it, you want a seat at the table. I'm sorry. That seat is already taken, by me. And the most ironic part, Ruth didn't need to humiliate anyone. Her victory was in her stillness. In the freedom to choose who walked beside her. She didn't want revenge. She wanted respect. And now, she had it, quiet, overdue, and perhaps never spoken aloud. Because some victories don't shout. They bloom. And keep stitching forward. The venue was strung with soft lights, banners crocheted in vibrant hues, and mannequins dressed in sweaters, scarves, and hats that told stories in stitches. The Threaded Legacy launch party was held in a repurposed warehouse, now transformed into a community space. Ruth wore a self-made teal dress, discreet crochet details at the collar. Her hair pinned up with care, her mother's brooch at her chest. She moved gracefully through the crowd, greeting neighborhood women, loyal customers, curious young entrepreneurs. They were all there, her fellow knitters, her biggest clients, the girl who handled marketing, Helena, her soul sister, and even some local teens who launched creative projects inspired by Ruth's story. When her name was called for a speech, the room fell silent. She stepped onto the small stage, gripping the microphone with calm confidence. She took a deep breath, scanned the room, and smiled. Not long ago, I was just a woman with needles in her hands and a quiet heart. My house was silent. My ideas felt small. And my knitting was a way not to disappear from myself. She paused. Her voice carried softness and strength. They told me I was wasting time. That I was getting old. That no one cared about yarn, or stitches, or details. Maybe they were right, if all I had been sewing was clothing. She stepped closer to the crowd, her eyes bright. But what I was really stitching was memory. Was connection. Was belonging. And one day, without even trying, that touched other people. What was once loneliness became community. What was once silence became story. Ruth held up the small tag she always tucked in with her orders, made with love and story. The thread that stitched me back to life was the very one my family tried to cut. But I wove it back, with other hands, other voices, other stories. Together, we built a network where no one needs permission to exist. Applause. Tears. Quiet awe. And under those warm amber lights, in a room pulsing with life, Ruth felt something she'd never fully known. Belonging. Not as a mom. Not as a grandma. Not as someone's ex. But as Ruth. A woman. A maker. The founder of her own story. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to her journey. Every week, we bring you stories of women who decided to rewrite their lives, with courage, grief, and late-blooming strength. Which part of Ruth's story moved you the most? Let us know in the comments, we read them all. And share this video with someone who needs the reminder, it's never too late to stitch a new life.